This is Mike Rust. He was an avid mountain biker, spending much of his time cycling through the wilderness. Well, Mike disappeared in 2009, and what was left of him wasn't found until 2016. There are terrible things in those mountains, and you can't outrun them on a bicycle. You're watching Darkness Prevails, the best place to share your creepy stories with the world, because this world is a strange one. Biking is a fun way to exercise and see the sights around you, and for many people it's more relaxing than walking. But two wheels do not remove you from the dangers and mysteries that infest our planet. These 5 allegedly true scary biking stories will show you that. If you want to be in a future video, I still need a few good Disneyland and Disney World scary stories. Send them to me at darknessprevails.org/submit. Stay till the end of the video as well for my favorite early comments from the previous episode. Now then, let's go for a ride, shall we? Number 1. Don't bike late at night. Submitted by F. I moved around a lot when I was younger, and for the past 5 years I've been living in a mediocre city. The first thing my mother told me when we moved there was that I was under no circumstances was I allowed to go outside after dark, no matter what time it was. Being older now, I can understand why she said that, especially as I was petite for my age, and I was a little too trusting of people, and that fact alone often scared my parents. This was during my summer break. I had plans for taking my bike to my friend's place after much discussion with my parents. It was late, almost 2 in the morning, and it was pitch black outside, of course. After much begging and arguing, my parents allowed me to go. I just had to call as soon as I got there. Being the bright-minded person I was, the first thought I had was to pick up some food to eat once I get there. And the ride from McDonald's to my friend's place was simply 5 or 10 minutes or so, if you were going quick enough. So I took my bike, and I started to make my way over to McDonald's. I felt watched before even locking my bike once I got there. Not too far away in the parking lot, I saw a group of grown men standing there. They must have been in their 40s or something. They were drinking and being generally loud and kind of irritating. I walked over to the door and I pulled on it, only to realize the said door was locked. Despite having a giant glowing "Open 24/7" sign, the place was indeed closed. There was a small paper there that said they would be open at 6. I was hungry and angry and cold, so I started to make my way back to my bike, and only when I unlocked it did I finally hear them screaming and laughing. I have a bit of a selective hearing thing. If something doesn't have to do with me, I don't hear it, and it's as simple as that. These men, however, they were trying to get my attention. As I wasn't paying attention to them, they had gotten into their car and screamed at me, offering me a ride home since it was so late. I knew not to trust these people, and I did try to ignore them, only for them to grow impatient and more rude. After being called countless things, I finally was able to ride away on my bike, only for them to follow me. And then they tried to hit me when I was crossing the street to bike on the sidewalk instead of the road. What was wrong with them? I was so afraid. I'd never had such an adrenaline rush as I did that day. I was panicking, and there was no way I could get home and inside to safety before these people could do whatever they wanted. To make one thing clear, it was common in my area for kids to go missing, and I've been followed by cars in the past. We lived in a complex with a code to even enter our house, and getting inside could take up to 5 minutes with my bike especially. So going home and crying to my parents wasn't in the picture. I was alone in this. Now, I've always been a very daring child when it comes to biking, or in general. In this area, I knew what I could and couldn't do. So all at once, I hit the brakes, almost causing myself to fall off and probably seriously injure myself. But it did do what I wanted it to do. It caught the guys in the car off guard. I had some time now, so I rushed on my bike to my friend's place. I took a secluded and dangerous route, only because they didn't have a way for cars to enter there. But they were angrier now. I could hear them yelling. I was crying and trying not to drop my phone as I called my friend, pleading for her dad to come out and meet me. Somehow I made it. Somehow I was alive. When I arrived, my hair was a mess, and I was bawling my eyes out. This friend's dad was a biker. He looked and could be dangerous. He's actually in a biker gang. So when these guys finally caught up, all they really did was drive by slowly as he was comforting me and glaring at them. I never told my parents until much later. I'd already gotten in trouble for drinking at this friend's house, and at the time, she was the only thing keeping me on the ground. I did see that group of men again multiple times. I couldn't get their faces out of my head. I still can't. Seeing as I never told my parents, no charges were made, and these guys are still out there, and I can't help but wondering who else they may have hurt. I feel like, by escaping and not telling anyone, I may have sacrificed someone else. I guess what I have to say is, listen to your parents. At any time of day, you could stumble upon the wrong people. People who make a fun drinking game out of running you over. Number 2. Night Bike Ride. Submitted by Kiefer. Growing up, I always wanted to go on a bike ride at night. Something about the idea of it just seemed so cool and exhilarating to me. It wasn't until I was 13 that my mom finally thought I was old enough to do something like that. She told me to be sure to wear a helmet and to take a flashlight and my phone with me. After that, she told me how far I could go, which was around 4 miles from the house. But to me, that was a massive distance. And as you could have guessed, as soon as the sun went down, I was out there. I loved it. There were no people out, no one walking their dogs, no other kids running around and screaming, and the temperature was perfect. I was having such a good time that I completely ignored the limits my mom set. You see, where I was biking, there were all these walking paths. It was one of those grassy areas between 2 neighborhoods. There's this long path that went about 600 feet at a 25-degree angle. I was flying down a hill, having an absolute blast. It was like I was riding a roller coaster. I darted right through my limits. But though I wasn't thinking about it back then, I know now that my mom set these limits for a reason. Everything on the inside was close to people's houses. The outside of this perimeter, though, was more barren. I rode along this path for 10 minutes before I could only see some of the lights of the houses inside the limits. After about 15 minutes of riding along the dirt path, I began to hear something strange. Someone was singing. It sounded about 30 to 40 feet in front of me. I stopped where I was, and I began to listen. It was a woman's voice. She was singing Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles. But she wasn't singing the words, just the melody of the vocals, like an open-mouth hum. Her voice was strange. You know how you get phlegm in your throat, your voice gets scratchy. Well, that's how she sounded. I inched forward to try to see her. I got close enough to see the silhouette of hair bouncing up and down, like she was headbanging. I decide to get my flashlight out. I'm thinking maybe this person is in need of help or something. Or maybe she's just not right in the head. And if I point my flashlight at her, she will be scared away and I can keep going. So I take out my flashlight and I point it at her and I turn it on. The moment the light hit her, she stopped moving completely. She was facing away from me and I could see her now. Her hair was disgusting. Patches of it were sticking together in places. Some of her hair was ripped out as well. She was wearing a bright red hoodie that was 2 times as big as she needed it to be. I was so startled, I was too scared to move, and I think she was too. I conjured up as much bravery as I could, and I said to her, "I'm sorry," in a very "oops, this is wrong" kind of thing. She didn't respond, and she still didn't move. I then clicked off the flashlight, and I put it back in my pocket. Just as I began to turn my bike around, she screams, an awful high-pitched screech. It was so horrifying that it sent chills through my whole body, and my heart seemed to stop in that very moment. I got back on my bike. As I did, I heard her voice getting closer to me, but I booked it as fast as I could. I didn't look behind me, and I definitely didn't stop pedaling. Her screaming grew quieter and quieter until I was far enough away that it devolved into a howling in the wind. As soon as I made it home, I told my mom, and she immediately called the police. She also wasn't very happy that I had disobeyed her. The cops checked the area, but they didn't find anyone matching her description, which was odd because she stuck out like a sore thumb. I'm 16 now, and even to this day I get creeped out just thinking about that night. Even though it might seem cool to test your limits and all, you never know who or what is lurking out there waiting for you. Usually, when your parents tell you you can't go somewhere, it's probably for your own good. Number 3. Summer Attack. Submitted by Ashley E. I live in a small town, not too far from a Native American reservation in Oklahoma. I was 14 in the summer of 2010. It was about a week into our school break, and I was ready for something interesting to do. I've always loved going outdoors and going on all the different bike trails around our town, but that soon got old and I wanted something new to me. And that's when I got the idea of fixing up the old bike trails around the reservation. I got my older brother, Daniel, who was 20 at the time, to come along with me. He was always the type of guy to get into fights, and he never got scared easily. He was always in some kind of trouble too, but he had a car, and he was good about finding his way through the woods and hills around our town, so he seemed like the perfect choice of the person to come with me. We headed out to the trails about 2 weeks into summer break. The first day, we mostly walked the little paths we could find of the trail that led through the woods. My brother had the idea of coming back the next day with machetes to clear out the low-hanging branches and weeds that covered the main pathways. I agreed, and we began heading back to the car. About halfway back, we began to hear these weird animal calls coming from the woods, but we didn't think too much about it. When we got back in the car, my brother said it sounded like a dog or a coyote, sounded like it was hurt or something. The highway wasn't too far from here, so it made sense. That next day, we got there as soon as the sun started to break through the morning sky, lighting the woods in a sort of twilight. It was very peaceful. Then we began working the day away, all the way through lunch. We cleared out a good amount of trails, even making some sick bike jumps as well. Before we knew it, the sun was beginning to set, and that's when we began hearing the same call as yesterday. This time it was closer than before. The moment the call went out, everything went dead. Not a single sound could be heard except for cars passing by on the highway in the distance, but that was to the north of the woods. I looked at my brother, who had a spooked look on his face. He was looking at something, on one of the uncleared trails. Then I listened to him under his breath, basically reading off a list of words that would make a sailor blush. My brother was afraid. He picked up his machete and told me to run back to the car. I looked at him startled and confused at first, and then I looked past him and saw what he was looking at. I was so horrified that I let out a whimper, and it got the thing's attention. Whatever it was tall, around 7 feet high, and its chest was well built, except for the bottom where its ribs were showing, as if it was starved. Its limbs were not proportionate to its body. They were longer and thin. Its hands were long, bony claws. Its face was just as bony as those ribs. Details of an animalistic skull could be seen underneath the skin. Its jaw was like that of a dog's, and its eyes were solid black. As it looked at me, it let out the most horrible scream I've ever heard, like the mix of a deer in pain and a cat hissing. My brother then snapped at me, saying that he said to run. I ran, tears in my eyes, nearly hitting every tree root and branch along the way. I ran hard, thinking every second that my brother was being attacked, and that he would be a goner, and then it would be coming for me next. I was so frantic, I didn't even notice at first that I had run out of the woods and right onto the highway, where I ran into a state patrolman who was performing a traffic stop. He took one look at me and ran for me. I immediately started pointing back at the woods, telling the officer my brother was being attacked out there. I didn't care at this point if he thought I was crazy. I just wanted to see my brother alive. To my shock, the officer took me at my word and called in animal control. As soon as help arrived, he went into the woods, weapon drawn. I sat in the back of the car, explaining to another officer what had happened. That's when I heard someone on the radio requesting an EMT, saying something about an animal attack. What happened to my brother? When the original officer came back, he was white as a sheet, and at any moment I expected him to tell me that my brother was no longer alive. But to my relief, he said my brother was fine, save for some cuts and a few broken ribs. He then tells me that we're both lucky to be standing here, because when he came across my brother, he was lying against a tree, covered in red. I asked about the animal, hoping to hear that the cop had done something about it. That's when he turned away from me. He said he saw a figure limping away, said that my brother did well to try to fight off that bear like that. I paused for a moment, and then said that that was no bear. He looked at me and said you were just scared. So scared, in fact, that you didn't see it for what it really was. I tried to change his mind, but he got close to me and whispered, "Look, my grandma used to tell me stories about those things. If I say it was a bear, it was a bear. Leave it at that. You'll drive yourself mad thinking about the things that exist out there." After that, they took me home to my mother. We waited there for the cop to bring my brother's car home so we could get to the hospital, as he had the only car. When we finally get to the hospital, I see my brother sitting up with a look of relief on his face, seeing that I'm okay. He had to get a bunch of stitches, but afterwards he was okay. But nowadays he won't talk about what happened. As for me, I know it was no bear. I know better than to believe that. These eyes don't lie, and I know what I saw. After that, I didn't go biking any longer, because I refused to go near the woods ever again. My brother, on the other hand, braver than I, continues to go hiking and even continues to ride the bike trails we had set up, because he believes that whatever he saw, that it won't be back. I don't believe that. If you're ever in Oklahoma, never go into the woods after dusk. Number 4. The Thing in the Woods, submitted by Connor H. I'm going into my junior year of high school, but this story you're about to hear took place when I was very young. It was around the summer I was going into my second grade year of school. I remember it was a beautiful summer morning. You know, the kind of days with a big bright blue sky, with big white fluffy clouds that looked like huge cotton balls. My best friend at the time, and still is to this day, spent the previous night at my house, and we were a basic pair of kids looking for a good way to pass the time. Let's call my friend Soy. The thing we both had in common at the time was a love for biking. I remember we were always biking everywhere, and it was really an amazing hobby to have when I was younger. We both discussed our plans for the day. It was still early, however, around 9 or 10 in the morning. So we fell back on our default option, going on a bike ride around the neighborhood. The neighborhood has forests basically behind every house, at least specifically in my area of the neighborhood. We made our way up the street we lived on, and then took a left at a four-way intersection. We turned down the beginning of what was a huge hill and began to speed down much faster than what was safe. I remember having forests on either side of me and the wind rushing through my hair. At the bottom of the hill was the neighborhood pool, which was currently closed because it was still too early. Something was very off that day. Just because it was an amazing day out and not a single person was outside in any direction. This was very unusual, especially for the summer. Anyway, we're both going full speed down this hill. We're neck and neck, kind of racing each other. You know how competitive boys can be. At the bottom is the pool's parking lot, surrounded by a dense forest, home to deer and beavers, which we would see occasionally. We are about to pull in the parking lot when Soy passes me and beats me into the lot. This parking lot has two exits leading onto the same road. What we usually do is pull into one and loop around and go out the other one. That way we don't have to stop and then turn around. As we are doing this loop, I watch Soy turn his head casually in the direction of the forest and then jump as if he had just seen a jump scare from a horror movie. "What is that?" he said, and then continued to pedal full speed out of the parking lot, faster than I thought he could. For some reason, I thought he was pulling a joke on me. I laugh and say, "Shut up." But still curious, I then glance to where he was previously looking, and I see something. It's in the overgrown grass in front of the forest. The grass is around 5 or 6 feet tall and extremely thick, but what I will say next, you probably won't believe. That's okay, I barely believe it myself, because around 4 feet up in the grass sticking out of it was the head and face of some kind of hairy creature. I hate to say I can't remember the details, but I remember it had an elongated nose like a dog. Its hair was a thick dark brown, and it had very, very long teeth coming from its mouth. But the thing that stuck with me the most was that it had 2 bright yellow eyes. I swear, freaking yellow. Needless to say, I went as fast as Soy did, back to my house, screaming, "What is that?" and nearly wetting myself. As we pulled up to my house, I saw my mother planting flowers. We both explained to her what happened, but then she replied with, "Sounds scary. You boys should investigate." She thought we were freaking joking, but I can't say I blame her, I guess. But still, being greeted with that, the two of us looked at each other, visualizing what might happen to us if we did go back and investigate that. The next day, though, I did drive by that lot, and I looked out into the grass to see if it was there again, but I saw nothing. To this day, we have no idea what we saw. And number 5, Night Chaser, submitted by S. James N. I was 14, and I was with a group of friends the same age as me. We had been biking around town, playing Pokemon Go. It was about 6:00 p.m. when this started. While riding our bikes, I turned my head to the side, checking to make sure there were no cars behind us. That's when I noticed a blue sedan. There was a group of about 4 in the car, it appeared, but that's really all I noticed. I shouted for everyone to get to the side of the road so that we could let the car pass. I remember that car making a very distinctive sound. I think the muffler might have been broken or something, as it was very loud. Although I didn't think that much of it, throughout the night I kept seeing that car. Sometimes it would be sitting at the side of the road, or it would turn onto the road we were on. Once we got to the park, I mentioned this to a friend, being the paranoid person I was. They told me to calm down, and that it probably wasn't the same vehicle, so no biggie. Easy for them to say, I thought. The park we were at was right next to a school, so sometimes cars would drive in and out of the parking lot. About an hour had passed before I heard the distinctive sound of the same car coming into the parking lot. It had circled the lot and stopped in front of the playground, where we were. It stayed there for a few seconds, as if they were watching us, before driving away. This made me very nervous, but as they had left, I calmed down a bit. A few minutes later, they came back and parked their car in the parking lot in clear view of us. We had 2 girls in our group, and they got kind of nervous. I kind of got everyone together and told them that I had seen that car earlier today. We all just stopped what we were doing and looked at the car. It suddenly started up, and they revved up its engine. It was already dark out, so the only light was from the parking lot. The men from the car started shouting things to us, but we couldn't understand what they were saying. The doors to the car opened. We watched 4 men step out, covering their faces with bandanas. I started panicking, and I yelled, telling everyone to get on their bikes. We all ran towards our bikes and left through a path at the back of the playground that led to the road. The 2 girls didn't have bikes, so me and one of the other guys stayed with them, riding slowly. Suddenly, we heard the car again. It kept getting louder and closer. Eventually, it slowly drove past us. One of the men was looking, staring at us, and waved. But it was in a creepy way, not at all friendly. And they made sure we saw them looking up and down at the underage girls that were with us. They just drove past us without another problem, and for a moment I was relieved, until I saw the other group of ours turn down a road, and the car followed them. Next thing we knew, we heard one of them screaming. I knew exactly who it was. I bolted down the road and turned to see my friend lying on the ground, and the car was out of sight. When I asked him what happened, he said that they had told him to run for his life. Then they hit him, and they told him to never step foot in the park again, or he wouldn't survive being hit again. Many people don't understand how gangs have risen in this country. How many towns like ours are basically terrorized by gangs like this. We're just kids wanting to play at a playground, but now we can't do that without fear of being run down on our bikes. Whether you're walking, running, or biking your way to safety, odds are the danger that's chasing you is gonna catch up sooner or later. Humans just can't move very fast on their own, so unless you're in a motorized vehicle, that thing you're worried is going to eat you is probably gonna have plenty of leftovers. But by all means, don't let me stop you from enjoying your exercise routine. In fact, I might go out and buy myself a bike pretty soon. But you better believe I'm hooking that thing up with NOS, so if I see something terrifying coming my way, I'll push that little red button and be nothing more than a blur. Good night. Be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to send me your Disneyland and Disney World stories soon at darknessprevails.org/submit. If you want to support this channel, You can buy tons of cool merchandise cheap, like stickers, decals, t-shirts, and coffee mugs at morbidmonsters.com. Or think about donating just $1 a month at patreon.com/darknessprevails. Thank you. As promised, here are my 5 favorite early comments from my previous full episode on the 10 most disturbing 4chan posts. Michael Sorbello Horror Stories says, 4chan is a dark place. 4chaners might deny it, but you're right. And I just had to read the reply too, from Dominique Vulpes. 4chan is the salty spittoon, and Reddit is Weenie Hut Juniors. I couldn't agree with you more, Dominic. My experience on Reddit has been very Weenie Hut. Zachro Dawes says, is it bad that I've never even heard of 4chan? Or am I just not a normal person? Oh, Zach, we're gonna be normies for life, bro. Gaming with Finn says, this is spooping me hardcore. I'd think that's something you tell your doctor about. I'm not a professional. And Deadshoot says, Darkness, do you want a balloon? Well, no matter my answer, it looks like you already gave it to me, and a scary clown for some reason. How about this? You keep the clown, and I'll take the balloon. Anyway, thank you all so much for listening. Stay safe out there, and stay creepy.